Good morning. We've got everybody? All right. Well, thank you for being here today. I am Stacy Gilmore, and I'm the councilwoman who represents District 11. And so first, give yourselves a round of applause. You had to get up on a Saturday. It's cold out, and you showed up. And so I really appreciate it. And we are going to have an important conversation today. I want to first thank the folks who made this event possible, the District 11 staff, the mayor's office, Councilman Herndon, the Office of Economic Development, our facilitators, volunteers, and Resource Fair, and of course you as our community participants today. I would like to have the steering committee who helped us coordinate this entire event. I'm sure they're out running all about, but the folks of the steering committee that we have here, if you would please stand and be recognized. This was a huge undertaking, and it was all on a volunteer basis. And so community members make our world go round, and so they really showed up and asked us hard questions, and I really appreciate their continued support of this event. Our volunteers today, if you have any questions throughout the day, where's the restroom, where do I go to this session, what time is lunch, our volunteers have a blue name tag on, and so it's outlined in blue, so please just look, and they should be able to at least direct you in the right direction to have your question answered. We also have today our mayor, Mayor Hancock is here, so thank you, Mayor. I know it was a long trek. And then we also have, as our keynote speaker, an esteemed economist, Dr. Jared Bernstein, and so thank you for being here as well, sir. We are at a transformational time in our city. And as you all know, in our neighborhoods, we have growth, we have change, and we need to hear from you. We need to have your perspective. We need to hear your ideas, and we need to have your feedback, both positive and critical, so that we can come together and make good decisions. We've been listening to you, and we hear you. Through the annual town hall visioning we held in 2016 and this past February, through our community cabinet, through the Montbello Leadership Group, through our Next Generation Cabinet, through monthly registered neighborhood organization meetings, and the many other community events, we've compiled thousands of survey responses from you. And we've worked on, in my council office, close to 600 constituent issues. You're the experts in our community. You know exactly what you want, and working together, we'll get there. We, and when I say we, I mean all of us, are an aligned and a strategic bunch of folks. We value our diversity, our inclusivity, our families, our children, and our elders. And we know that we face significant challenges and decisions about how we navigate rising property values, growth, and capacity issues. Having been a longtime member of the district, I have seen and felt such a spirit of collaboration and unity from all of you over the past couple of years. We ask hard questions, we expect answers, and through continuing to show up, speak up, and stand up, we will ensure that all citizens in Montbello, Parkfield, Green Valley Ranch, and High Point have the opportunity and support to succeed. I'm humbled and honored to be on this journey with you. Let's continue our work together to ensure that now and in the future, we are creating a city that we can all be proud of and that includes all people. I'm honored to introduce next a visionary leader who this entire summit was his idea. He's a valued mentor, friend, and community member. Let's give a warm welcome to District 11 resident, Mayor Michael B. Hancock.
Thank you all so much, and let me start by thanking Councilwoman Stacy Gilmore. We could not have elected a better representative for this area of town to represent us, and I mean that. I'm gonna tell you all a little story because, you know, I almost started a recall effort on her yesterday. So yesterday was the annual Shakespearean Festival in Denver. And I decided to wear a Shakespearean costume to welcome the 5,000 Denver Public School kids who were in downtown Denver. So I looked really cool. But as I came back into City Hall, I still had the costume on. Councilwoman Gilmore exits the elevator, looks right at me, up and down, and turns and walks away. And I said, "Oh, you can't speak?" And she turns, she goes, "Oh my God!" She said, "I thought you were an elderly woman." We were about to fight, I'm telling you. Let me acknowledge as well, Councilman Herndon, Chris Herndon is in the house, and is going to come up later on and say a few words. District 9, I want to let you know that there are several members of my team who are going to be with you throughout the day as part of this summit. And I want you to know who they are. First, Executive Director of the Housing Opportunity for People Everywhere, Eric Sullivan, is here working on housing issues. I see Sean Johnson, one of our Community Affairs Director. Our HR, our Human Rights and Community Partnership Executive Director, Derek Okubo, is in the house as well. Our Interim Director for Office of Economic Development, Amy Ettinger, is here as well. One of our District 11 residents and Director of Parks for the City of Denver, Scott Gilmore. Who doesn't know Scott Gilmore? I also have, where's Miss Melissa Sotelo, who's here? Jerry? Oh, what's up? What's up, Melissa? Thank you, who helped put this on. Very much, good job. And I see Jay Martinez is here somewhere. Where's Jay? Oh, Jay. No, I said Martinez. Jay, stand up. Runs our empowerment program, our city economic empowerment program. And I want you to meet one of my friends. Y'all, I hope y'all know this guy. He's Mr. Friendly Cop. But I want you to know Kenneth Chavez, who is our Lieutenant of Denver Police Department, District 5, is in the house. Our lead economist, Jeff Romine, is here. Stand up. Come on. I want to make sure I have everybody. Who am I missing? Anybody? Who? I didn't get John Martinez? Oh, I'm sorry, our Director of Recreation, John Martinez, is in the back. Stand up, John. I apologize. See? That's why I called you Martinez. I'm thinking Martinez. All right, that's why I got. Hey, listen, I'm going to move quickly because I know we want to get going with the summit. This is very important. Communities coming together to talk about their economic opportunities and futures. This city has seen, and I've given this speech 3 times this month, so I'm going to say these things and then let's move on to the fact that we know we have challenges and be real about them, because in only addressing those challenges only being real about challenges can we really address them. So we are seeing unprecedented growth in this city. 1,000 people per month are moving to Denver. 1,000 people. In the metro area, we're seeing 4,500 people per month moving to the area. We have seen our unemployment rates drop from almost double digits to 3%, 3.3%. At times we were below 3%, 2.9%. We are seeing wages climb in the city of Denver. We want them to climb faster, but the bottom line is that our wages are climbing. With all that's going on, all the goodness that is happening, we are seeing tremendous pressure on our housing and our mobility. Anyone try to drive from this area of town, downtown, or other parts of town lately? And the reality is if you're a resident of District 11 or far northeast, we have very good reason to be very concerned about what we're seeing. No one will argue about the fact that we're glad to see development happening. We're glad to see the growth. We're glad to see our appreciation of our properties, which, by the way, this area of town is one of the top leading areas in terms of valuation of properties. We've seen a 50% increase. That is something to applaud, but also something for every one of us to be extremely concerned about going forward. So what the prosperity has shown us is that there are folks being left behind, and there are also neighborhoods severely vulnerable to gentrification, being pushed out. When you see valuations occur the way we've seen in Montbello and Green Valley Ranch and Parkfield, we have to move quickly to address some of these challenges that are being exposed through the prosperity of the city. It does us no good to act like they don't exist. It does us no good to turn a blind eye and say, oh, it's a great time, things are popping, finally Montbello's got its values. We all want our properties to be valued properly, but we don't want to be priced out because taxes overwhelm us. And so there are some things that we've learned through our gentrification study that we can do in neighborhoods, and we have already brought some of these mechanisms to bear here in the Montbello, Parkfield areas in particular, such as, how do we help our seniors understand about the tax rebate program in the area? How do we train and reskill, retool some of our people who are working in transforming industries, transitioning industries that live in Montbello, because it's a very working class community. It's a bedroom community. How do we improve the businesses that are out here? Yes, bring the amenities that we want, and our OED, Office of Economic Development, they're here. They've been working for a couple of years now on the grocery store issue in the Montbello community, along with some of our neighbors who have worked diligently on this issue and care very much about what's happening out here. How do we make sure that the schools are continuing to do well and improving in the area? Because that's the first step, right? So we're not ignoring, we're very well aware of what's happening out here. But it does take, as Councilwoman Gilmore pointed out, a couple things. One, not one entity or individual is responsible. This is the success that we've all dreamed of. It's happening much faster and much bolder than we expected, which means that we collectively have to work together to address it. Secondly, it's systemic. Now, one thing is causing, I'm sure the economists will talk about today, there is a compilation of things. This is a systemic challenge, and it's going to take systemic, multi-pronged approach to address all the challenges that we face out here. And thirdly, this is not the time to believe that this is not the place you want to live. This is the next frontier of Denver. It is Denver's new frontier. This is where the jobs want to come. This is where the investment is wanting to be had, because you have the most developable land out here. And all you have to do is look across the street down the street on Chambers and see the 700 new units coming in and the new apartment complex. This is where people are making investment outside of downtown Denver along this corridor of opportunity. We live in the most desirable place of Denver. So it's a great opportunity to continue to call this place home. But how do we make it so it doesn't have to be either or? That we can improve the area and I don't have to move because I can't afford it. But guess what? I can continue to make this a desirable place and continue to call the far northeast home, because that's what we all desire. It can be done, and I hope that's what this economic summit is all about. All of us sharing ideas, all of us talking about how the new frontier of Denver continues to be that place we can call home and be proud of. And we don't have to be pushed out or feel the pressure of being pushed out because it's improving. You deserve the very best. You lived in this area when most people were saying we don't want to go there. You have shown that this is a desirable place. You knew the secret before everybody else did. And so now we got to set the table for those who want to come here, invest here, so they understand how we live in the far northeast and why it's such a special place to live. And with that, I got to tell you, I'm proud to formally welcome Jared Bernstein to Denver. Bernstein is the former chief economist for my good friend, our good friend, and boy, do we miss him, former Vice President Joe Biden, and was a key member of our other good friend, and boy, do we miss him, President Obama's economic team. We wanted Dr. Bernstein to join us at this summit because because of the depth of his work and the knowledge that he has on subjects of income inequality and economic mobility, the very things that I just spoke about. His observations should set the stage perfectly for the work that all of us are going to be asked to do today. And so I'm going to ask you to give a warm, far Northeast Denver and a mile-high welcome to Dr. Jared Bernstein.
Wow, that was just a real treat listening to Mayor Hancock. Let me try, how's that? Is that better? Good. I was thinking we might want to just pull these chairs aside and get a basketball game going here. But in the meantime, let me talk to you a little bit about issues of economic mobility and economic development. And it was just such a pleasure listening to Mayor Hancock, and I'll tell you why. Because I come from D.C., that's true. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to get out of there for a day or two, although I must say I wasn't ready for the snow. But unfortunately right now, a lot of what I hear about from politicians in the city where I live is stuff that they think you want to hear, and not anything about the kinds of challenges and the analysis that Mayor Hancock just laid out. And it was just very refreshing to sit there and actually hear a politician say, here are the challenges and here's how we're going to meet them. So I appreciated that, sir. I also want to thank Councilman Herndon and Councilman Gilmore, who we had a nice dinner last night, so I feel like I'm part of the extended family, at least for a bit. I'm here to talk to you about economic mobility, not from the perspective of one district versus another, though I'll get into that a little bit. I'm not trying to pretend I come in here and understand your backyard the way you do. What I understand are the kinds of economic challenges that confront communities like this one, that are trying to build the economic mobility and opportunity that they and their kids need and deserve. You know, I mentioned coming from D.C. where everything is all Trump all the time, and I'm not going to get into that, both because I need a break and also because I don't want to go to any sort of a partisan place. But it is important to recognize that this upset election didn't come out of nowhere. It came out of a great deal of anger at elite politicians on both sides of the aisle for not solving a set of problems, a set of challenges that you face and that Mayor Hancock, Councilwoman Gilmore, and others have talked about. This is not about GDP growth, it's not about productivity, it's not about the stock market. They're all there, they're all important. I'm an economist, I pay a lot of attention to that. This is about an economy that's simply leaving too many people behind. Now, it's not just that economic and political elites didn't try to solve those problems, it's that they've ignored them or they've promoted false solutions, tax cuts for the wealthy or another trade deal or deregulating financial markets. I am a card-carrying advocate for increased trade. I happen to be passing through Denver International Airport, which is kind of a jewel in the crown out here, so I am not criticizing international trade by a long shot. But if you think that another trade deal is going to help the community that's been left behind by trade or by trade deficits or Rust Belt or coal area communities, you know, that's simply not the case. So instead of doing enough to help those with too little opportunity, help people displaced by globalization, people stuck in job deserts, people facing low wages with inadequate child care, raising housing costs, we've heard a lot about kinds of solutions that tend to kind of circle around cutting taxes for wealthy people and assuming that's going to trickle down. That's not what I'm going to talk about today. What I'm going to talk about today is opportunity. What do I mean by opportunity? I mean something very simple and straightforward. The chance to realize your potential, and just as important, maybe more important, is the chance to provide your children with the opportunities they need to realize their potential. Now, as an economist, I tend to think about this in terms of economic potential, so that leads me to think about education educational potential, occupational potential, moving up the occupational ladder in terms of your capacities, your responsibilities at work, your earnings potential, your ability to accumulate some wealth, perhaps through home ownership or through a savings or retirement account. If a child faces an inadequate school system or a toxic environment, it will be much harder for her to realize her intellectual and later her economic potential. If a parent lives in a community with disinvestment, with an insufficient quantity or quality of jobs that pay too low wages to support a family, or jobs for which she happens to lack the necessary skills, both she and her family will face opportunity shortfalls. Such barriers go beyond schooling. Such opportunity barriers, they go beyond schooling. They include housing, nutrition, healthcare, even infrastructure. Consider the fact that due to toxic infrastructure in Flint, Michigan, that is lead leaching from pipes into the water system, you've got kids who are suffering excessive levels of lead in their blood, which can damage their brains. This is a clear example of an opportunity barrier constructed by a public policy failure, and one that frankly should be unacceptable in an economy as wealthy and advanced as our own. So giving that framing of the problem, there's a clear role for policy in this opportunity space to take down the barriers that get between people, take down the barriers that get between people in the realization of their economic potential. And so for the rest of my talk, and I'm going to try to keep this to 20, 25 minutes, I don't know that we want to start today with too much of an economist going on at you here. I want to talk about, for the rest of my time with you, precisely that. What are these barriers? What are the policies that will tear them down? Well, of course, there are labor market barriers, and they're associated with income, with race, and with education. Recent research by the Federal Reserve found that unemployment rates between 2011 and 2015 averaged 13% in low and moderate income communities, compared with 7%, a little bit more than half that amount, in communities that had higher incomes. In majority-minority communities, in communities with majority-minority populations, the jobless rate, the unemployment rate, averaged 14% in those years, and the share of prime-age workers in their prime-age working years, was nearly 9 percentage points lower than in majority communities. So right from the get-go, right from the start, there are labor market barriers, and some of them have to do with income. Some of them have to do with economic segregation. In recent decades, families with children have increasingly lived in economically segregated neighborhoods. And that's driven by rising income inequality, by wealthier parents segregating themselves into areas with high-performing schools and other residential benefits. Residential segregation by income exacerbates the kinds of opportunity gaps I'm here to talk to you about tearing down. It's this way that diminished opportunity leads to immobility. If high-income households are using their resources to purchase households in neighborhoods with schools that launch their children better than schools in other neighborhoods, that kind of sorting can reverberate throughout people's lives. There's education barriers associated with income. There are income barriers associated with inequality, and the fact that when GDP, when the overall economy grows, and too little of that growth flows to lower income families, their ability to overcome these mobility barriers, to move to places where opportunity is rich, to invest in their children's future, to avoid the kinds of problems in difficult neighborhoods like the one I described in Flint, that ability is diminished. One recent study of this issue of kids' mobility, it used an interesting metric, one that I thought was pretty intuitive. The likelihood that adult children will out-earn their parents. So you study kids over their life cycle and you ask, what's the likelihood that they're going to earn more than their parents when the kids themselves become adults? Well, in fact, that's fallen, and it's fallen fairly steeply, and the increase in inequality explains 70% of that decline. So this is not something that we can dismiss, and it's something we have to be very careful, in my view, about not exacerbating. There are employment and opportunity barriers associated with the criminal justice system. Here's a number that may blow your mind, and I've tried to check this every which way, and it seems to be the case. 70 million people in America now have a conviction or an arrest history that can show up in a background check for employment. That's can be a serious challenge for people trying to get back into the labor market, and in often cases, this is a result of a very minor infraction. So these are some of the kinds of opportunity barriers that people face. Difficulties with low access to educational opportunities, exposure to toxic environment, high levels of inequality that create very difficult barriers for people to overcome. And so what I'd like to do is talk about what we can do about that. What is the policy agenda that will help take down those opportunity barriers? Well, one of them you actually heard referenced by the mayor earlier, and that's a tight labor market. You know, it is just so much harder to make things go well in communities like the ones we're focusing on today, Denver writ large, or really any place in the country when you're looking at unemployment rates that are in double digits than when you're looking at ones that are in single digits. Low unemployment rates for the nation prevail right now, 4.5%, lower here in Denver. But there are, of course, pockets where that's not the case. And so one of the policies that I'm going to really emphasize here is the importance of tight labor markets. And one way to get there is to invest in infrastructure. Do you know that we're here in a very good-looking public school, but over half of Americans' public schools need to be repaired, renovated, modernized. The average age of a public school building in America today is 44 years old. I mean, I'm older than that, but that's still kind of old for a public school. Roofs and windows and boilers and ventilation and plumbing, electrical systems need to be fixed and upgraded. So when I hear people talk about infrastructure programs, I hear them talk about roads and bridges, and I get that. That's what we did in the Recovery Act, and that's important. But I also think let's fix our stock of public schools. I live in a wealthy community in Alexandria, Virginia, and yet there are public schools there that need a ton of work. So we can't ignore that infrastructure. Now, of course, human capital. Already in the conversations I've had with people today, we've heard about the need for people to have the kinds of access to training and education and apprenticeship opportunities that are so important in not just getting companies to come here, but staffing them when they do. And we've talked a little bit about, I've had some conversations even this morning about the importance of expanding apprenticeship. These are earning while you learn programs. And these programs offer long-term evidence-based strategies. They increase productivity by increasing worker skills at modest costs to governments. And in fact, some of these apprenticeships now are combining class-based learning with educational experience, 2 to 4 year credentials, mastering occupational employing skills. I think that it's critically important to think about what economists call the supply side of the equation, making sure the infrastructure is in place, the schools are in good shape, and you've got the workers you need. But what if you do that and there's still not enough jobs? All right, what if you're kind of all dressed up with nowhere to go? You've got the workers, you got the skills, you got the infrastructure, but there just aren't the jobs there. You know, it's not the case that you train a bunch of workers and you automatically have jobs for them to fill. That's just not the way economies work. It certainly is the case that you will often have employers who say we can't find the workers we need to meet our skill demands, and that's one of the reasons I'm emphasizing that. But that's not the whole story. And I think that in areas where there aren't enough jobs, we're going to have to start thinking about direct job creation, subsidized employment. You know, during the Recovery Act, when I was in the Obama administration, we offered employers temporarily, you don't want to break the bank, we offered employers 80–90% subsidizing the wages of a worker so that that employer would have a real incentive to give that worker a try. And you know, we employed 250,000 workers that way, and many of those workers hadn't been in the job market because they weren't able to overcome some of the kinds of barriers I've been talking to today. So I think subsidized jobs is something that I would urge communities to look at, particularly if the private sector labor demand remains too low. One area where I think investment is so important, and Colorado really has an edge on this, is in renewables, investing in renewable energy. And the market isn't necessarily going to go there by itself. So that's another area where I think direct job creation, subsidized employment, coupled with extensive training and apprenticeships programs can really work. Now, if you're able to find employment for the kinds of people that we're thinking about, the kinds of communities, the kinds of jobs that we're thinking about in this forum today, you know, some of those jobs, they're not going to pay enough for people to make ends meet. They're just not going to be living wage jobs. And we need to work at that, and there's different ways to do so. I urge increases in the minimum wage, I think, are an important policy, and Colorado is ahead of the game on that. By the way, if you pay attention, next week, I believe it's next week, you're going to hear the introduction of a new minimum wage bill from the Democrats, of course, and that's to go to $15 an hour by 2024. That's an ambitious proposal. It's not one that's going to get through this Congress, I wouldn't guess, but it's going to be an interesting advocacy process and something that you'll probably hear about. But in the meantime, there's a lot of other things we can do to support work. Healthcare is, I think, been a real advance. I worked on the Affordable Care Act when I was at the administration. And yes, there are people trying to tear that down, but thus far they've been unsuccessful in no small part because actually people want more affordable health care, not less. And so if you actually listen to Donald Trump on the campaign trail, what he told his constituents, what he told his base was, elect me and I'll make sure you get better health care that's cheaper. Well, what happened was they get to Congress and they start saying, well, we're going to take health care away. 24 million people are going to lose health care. And yeah, it'll be cheaper because it won't be much to it. And people said, no, thank you. People want the kinds of health care, the affordable, comprehensive health care that they're getting through Obamacare, through the Affordable Care Act. However, it ain't perfect. And it needs to be fixed in such a way that it is more affordable, not less so. So I do think that that's going to be an important piece of the puzzle. And I consider this, and some of the other things I'm about to talk about, as a work support, something that supports work. You know, it's not enough to just say, here's a job, for someone to have a job. Because if this is someone who's 35 years old and has a child or two, perhaps a single parent, and they're trying to make ends meet and they're earning, $9, $10, maybe $11 an hour, that's not a living wage. You can't get by in this city on that kind of an income. However, if you talk about an earned income tax credit, that is a 40% wage subsidy on that. If you talk about housing vouchers, if you talk about a health care plan that's comprehensive, now you're starting to talk about a job that gets you at least in the low end of the middle class. If you're complementing that with the kinds of apprenticeship or training services, enlisting community colleges, working with employers to figure out where the labor demand is going to be. Places like Montbello and the kinds of discussions I've been having with Councilwoman Gilmore, I see people who are trying to look around the corner and see where the next employment opportunity is coming from. And that's the sort of forward-looking movement that's critical. So combination of that sort of trying to look around corners, making sure the workforce is adequately trained, and building upon those private sector wages with a subsidized employment program, an apprenticeship, and a set of work supports. That kind of ambition, to me, is the combination that could really make a difference here. Now, I'm going to wind down here in a second, but I didn't want to leave without talking about criminal justice reform. I know I'm getting a little bit outside of my range here, but I'm kind of passionate about this. I told you, there's way too many people who face a barrier into the job market because of a criminal record. Some of this is the result of mass incarceration, so reducing penalty for low-level felonies, many of which fall disproportionately on minorities, re-examining sentencing laws, reducing sentences, that's all part of the agenda. But I'd also like to think about fair chance hiring practices. This is the idea where if someone comes in, some cities have now adopted ban-the-box ideas, which allows those with records to not have to reveal them in the initial interview stage. It doesn't mean that you can't, in fact, you do need to reveal that later in the interview. But just checking the box right out of the bat saying that yes, you have a criminal record can disqualify people who really deserve an opportunity. I want to talk about so I'm going to finish off. That's the agenda that I think is really consistent. Is very much what I think is the intersection of a growing private market economy like you have here in Denver and a set of public policies that push back on opportunity barriers and provide people with the kinds of mobility and opportunity, an opportunity agenda that they seek. But there's a bunch of stuff that we shouldn't be doing, a bunch of stuff that pushes in the wrong direction. You know, plans that thwart opportunity. So if you're contemplating tax cuts that are particularly beneficial to those at the very top of the income scale, well, that's the group that's really been doing pretty well in this economy already. So that simply exacerbates after-tax inequality. And I'm telling you, that's very clearly associated with immobility and diminished opportunity, with reducing the kinds of revenues we need to support the ideas that have been elaborated in my talk so far. So this last week, I've been doing a lot of media work on this issue of this proposed Trump tax plan. And I'm not going to get into the details here, but one of the things that this tax plan looks like it does is it loses $5 trillion of dollars to the revenues of the national treasury. So it cut tax revenues by about $5 trillion over 10 years. Now, it's extremely hard to do the subsidized employment, the health care, the earned income credit, the education, the apprenticeship programs, the earn while you learn kinds of programs. It's extremely hard to do any of that if you're taking $5 trillion of revenue and essentially giving a bunch of it to wealthy people who frankly don't need the money. They're doing okay already. Now, that doesn't mean there's never a time for a tax cut and there's never a time for a deficit increasing. I think there are. But instead of, I think, squandering our resources with that, let's invest them in opportunity. So that's my first point. Once you start, the problem is that once you start generating the sea of red ink in budget deficit, you're going to hear people say, well, now we have to cut the budget. And in fact, that's precisely what you're hearing. Well, what part of the budget do they want to cut? Precisely the kinds of budget items that are associated with the opportunities I'm talking about today. Housing assistance, job training programs, Head Start, assistance for poor school districts. These are federal funds that flow to states and flow to counties and districts like this one. Pell Grants, the Manufacturing Extension Partnership that I was just talking to somebody about out front that helps small manufacturers, small advanced manufacturers like you have here in Denver, connect with global supply chains. That gets cut. In fact, that program is zeroed out in the administration's budget. The cutting block grants to communities that support community and economic development. So that's where the budget cuts go. That's where the budget cuts go. This is not benign stuff, and I think that an opportunity agenda can't go there. Over the next years, what is it? I guess it's only been 100 days. Over the next 4 years minus 100 days, people like me are going to be playing a lot of defense. But that's not enough. Frankly, I'm really sick of playing defense. I'm ready to play some offense. And I think the way we... Well, sounds like you are too. I think the way we play offense is not to ignore what's happening on the national stage, not to just say they're cray-cray and that's what's going on over there. There is some of that, but that's not the whole thing. We have to start building an agenda now. And it has to be an agenda that resonates with people so that the next time people have a choice, because remember, I started my talk telling you, Trump is where he is today because he tapped into something that was real, something that really resonated with people. The fact that they've been left behind in an economy that's been growing, that's a real thing. And I credit him and his campaign for elevating that. I discredit them because the agenda that they're espousing goes exactly in the other direction. The agenda that I'm espousing makes those connections. And that's the agenda that we need to build so that the next time we have an opportunity to go out to America and say, here are the set of policies that will connect you and your family to growth, to opportunity, and mobility, we're ready for them. Thank you very much.
After his remarks to the gathered crowd, Dr. Bernstein spoke to Denver's Channel 8 and expanded on some of the key challenges that Denver will face as the city grows.
There's no question that Denver is a leading city. Simply look at population growth, okay? You can find areas in this country where people are leaving. There's never a traffic jam there. And those are areas that we really have to help. We can't just abandon them. But then you have areas where those people are coming to. And Denver is one of them. And that means making sure the workforce is up to speed, the infrastructure is up to speed, the educational system is in place. That takes public investment. You can't ignore that stuff. It's great that people want to come here, but they need to have an infrastructure in place to meet them.
One of the sponsoring partners of the summit, District 11 Councilwoman Stacy Gilmore, also spoke to us about how this event came about.
So, the past 2.5 years, we've been really talking with the community about what are those top priorities that you have. And so through these conversations, there's really 6 different pillars that have come out. And so some of them are food access, transportation, youth opportunities, housing. And so through those different pillars, we created breakout or feedback groups that we are having a city agency and then a local nonprofit partner facilitate those conversations, but really not leading the conversations in any one direction. We want to really hear from the community and encourage them to be creative and innovative and think outside the box and just really put all those ideas out there so we can go back and compile a report, and then we'll present it to the mayor and OED and our council offices and the community, and then hopefully this can become part of the 2018 budgeting process for the city to really just including this data that we're collecting here, so we're making data-driven budget decisions for our city.
Councilwoman Gilmore also shared how the findings from this summit will be shared with other Denver residents.
So we'll have them available online. We'll have links through our electronic newsletter. We'll print hard copies because, especially in our neighborhood, it's a privilege sometimes to have internet access and to have access that way. And so we want to make sure that this is accessible to everyone. We'll translate it into Spanish as well. And so we'll, hear from the community what the best mechanisms are for them to get this information. And it's really a responsibility of not just the council office or the mayor's office or OED, it's all of the community organizations. It's really every single individual who is here today, and that's from our oldest participant down to our youngest participant. We've got a lot of high school students here that this is their opportunity to really understand the civic process and be part of it, and so we'll get the word out far and wide and continue the conversation. For information online about the Economic Summit, you can go #EcoSum, ECOSUM 2017.